Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, Shri Giraj Govardhana Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Nitya Gaura Premanande. Would you like to join us? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 20, Text 35-36. It's two texts, but we'll just read both, I guess. Devarsi Pitri Gandharva Siddha Charana Panagaha Kinara Kinara Saraso Martya Kagabhutana Nekasha Yageshvara Diya Rajna Vagvitanjali Bhaktita Sabhajitaya Yur Sarve Vaikunta Nagutastata Devarshi Pitirgan Devarshi Pitirgandharva Siddhacharana Banaga Kinara Saraso Martya Kagabhutana Nekashaha Yageshvara Diya Rajna Vagvitanjali Bhaktita Sabhajitaya Yu Sarve Vaikunta Nugatastata. Devarshi Pitir Gandharva Siddhacharana Panagaha Kinarapsara Somartya Kagabhutanya Nekashaha Yageshvara Diyaragya Bhagvitanjali Bhaktitaha Sabhajitaya Yur Sarve Vaikuntanugatastata. Deva, the demigods, Rishi, the great sages, Pitir, inhabitants of Pitirloka, Gandharva, inhabitants of Gandharva Loka, Siddha, inhabitants of Siddhaloka. Charana, inhabitants of Charanaloka. Panagaha, inhabitants of the planets where serpents live. Kinara, inhabitants of the Kinara planets. Apsarasa, inhabitants of Apsara Loka. Martyo, in the inhabitants of the earthly planets. Kaga, birds. Bhutani, other living entities. Anekasha, many. Yagya Ishvara Diya, with the perfect intelligence of thinking as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Ragya, by the king. Vak, with sweet words. Vita, wealth. Anjali, with folded hands. Bhaktita, in a spirit of devotional service. Sabhajita, being properly worshipped. Yayu, went. Sarve, all. Vaikunta, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishnu, Anugataha, followers. Tata, from that place. Translation. King Prithu worshipped the demigods, the great sages, the inhabitants of Pitirloka, the inhabitants of Gandharva Loka, and those of Siddha Loka, Charana Loka, Panaga Loka, Kinara Loka, Apsara Loka, the earthly planets, and the planets of the birds. He also worshipped many other living entities who presented themselves in the sacrificial arena. With folded hands, he worshipped all these, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the personal associates of the Lord, by offering sweet words, as much wealth as possible, And after this function, they all went back to their respective abodes, following in the footsteps of Lord Vishnu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the modern so-called scientific society, the idea is very prevalent that there is no life on other planets, but that only on this earth planet do living entities with intelligence and scientific knowledge exist. The Vedic wisdom are fully aware of various planets inhabited by varieties of living entities such as demigods, sages, Pittars, the Gandharvas, the Panagas, the Kinaras, the Charanas, the Siddhas, and the Apsaras. The Vedas give information that in all planets, not only within the material sky but also in the spiritual sky, there are varieties of living entities. Although these living entities are of one spiritual nature, in the same quality as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they have varieties of bodies due to the embodiment of the spirit soul by the 8 material elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. In the spiritual world, however, there is no such distinctive features. In the spiritual world, however, there is no such distinction between the body and the embodied. In the material world, distinctive features are manifest in different types of bodies in the various planets. We have full information from the Vedic literature that each and every planet, both material and spiritual, they are living entities of varied intelligence. The Earth is one of the planets of the Burloka planetary system. There are 6 planetary systems above Burloka and 7 planetary systems below it. Therefore, the entire universe is known as Chaturdasha Bhuvana, indicating that it has 14 different planetary systems. Beyond the planetary systems in the material sky, there is another sky, which is known as Paravyoma, or the spiritual sky, where there are spiritual planets. The inhabitants of those planets engage in varieties of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which include different rasas, or relationships, known as Dasyaras, Sakyaras, Vatsalyaras, Madhuryaras, and above all, Parikyaras. Interesting. This Parikyaras, or Parama love, is prevalent in Krishna Loka, where Krishna lives. This planet is also called Goloka Vrindavan, and although Krishna lives there perpetually, he also expands himself in millions and trillions of forms. In one such form, he appears on this material world in a particular place known as Vrindavan Dham, where he displays his original pastimes of Gokula, Vrindavan Dham, in the spiritual sky, in order to attract the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gora Bhakta Vrinda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evcha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this verse again. King Prithu worshipped the demigods, the great sages, the inhabitants of Pitirloka, the inhabitants of Gandharva Loka, and those of Siddha Loka, Charana Loka, Panaga Loka, Kinara Loka, Apsara Loka, the earthly planets and the planets of the birds. He also worshipped many other living entities who presented themselves in the sacrificial arena with folded hands. He worshipped all these, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the personal associates of the Lord, by offering sweet words and as much wealth as possible. After this function, they all went back to their respective abodes, following in the footsteps of Lord Vishnu. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, Shri Giraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. This purport is showing us how unlimited Krishna is, and because Krishna is unlimited, how unlimited his creation is, and the variety that's in it. I was intrigued by all the different planets and the inhabitants of the planets. So I did a little searching to find out who exactly were these people. And it's interesting because here's Prithu Maharaj and we're sitting at the arena of the sacrifice. Sacrifice is concluded, Vishnu has appeared, Prithu has prayed, Vishnu has responded, and we're seeing the interaction between King Prithu and Lord Vishnu, but there's others there. And in this verse, we're seeing who the others are. So we're getting a visual appreciation of what that complete picture looks like. That it wasn't just the human beings who were there, like Prithu Maharaj. There were many, many others at that sacrifice. You think how when you're planning to plan a function, I had to recently plan functions, and you're trying to plan functions, you send out invites, right? So now imagine you have to send out invites to different planetary systems. Not just about, which of the family to invite and which ones not to invite, and whether you can cater and all of these things. But now you have to send out invites to different planetary systems. And that's how wide the hearts of the King Prithu was, also wide the pockets. They were able to cater for these events because the earth was now supplying, as we had heard. But I thought it was very interesting, if I can look at, I thought it was very interesting how these different living entities who were there in the different planetary systems, they're very specific living entities. They're very specific. It's not like there was like Apsaras, Gandharvas, we kind of read it in a sing-song, but who are they really? So one of the first people that I mentioned in the first, not first, but the Gandharvas come up. And generally you hear of Gandharvas who come from Gandharva Loka, and they're praised for their singing ability. Now, it's mentioned in the purport that Loka, which is where we are situated, is the middle planetary systems. So above us is 6 other higher planetary systems, and below us 7 lower planetary systems. And it's categorized as lower or higher depending on the consciousness of the living entities in it, as well as the mixture of pain and pleasure. In the higher planetary systems, there's more pleasure, less pain, and in the lower planetary systems, more pain, less pleasure, or more ability to enjoy, or less ability to enjoy is categorized like that. So therefore, mainly the living entities mentioned here are coming from the higher planetary systems, and the Gandharvas is one such group of people. And they all these different planets that so we would think like, you would think like in a university you have different faculties, faculty of engineering, faculty of arts, faculty of music. But this is entire planets, like everybody on the planet can sing. Like, because if you're not a Gandharva, why would you be in Gandharva Loka? So, and Gandharvas are characterized by their singing. So in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, first chapter, text 36, it said in the purport that the celestial species of human beings, like the Gandharvas and the Vidyadharas, can sing wonderfully and can entice even the minds of the heavenly demigods. Their musical rhythm represents the musical sense of the Lord. I thought this was very beautiful because, firstly, that if you look into all the fiction that exists in the world, when I hear this, I think about the image that comes to my mind is Little Mermaid, because there was this thing that mermaids could sing, on the shore, sing on the surface of the water, and that their music would entice the sailors, and that would sort of drive them mad. Now, God knows whether that's true or not true, but the idea is that where can these ideas come from? Where can these ideas come from? They can only come from whatever we think about. It already exists in the scripture. The scripture expands our imagination because it's there. It's there. Vidyaras and Gandharvas, that when they sang, they enticed the minds even of the demigods. And but the sort of enticement was not a material enticement, because their musical rhythm represents the musical sense of the Lord. So this is the big difference, that the Gandharvas had this ability to sing, but their ability to sing was bringing people closer to Krishna. And therefore they're the higher planetary beings. And then Prabhupada mentions, in the verse it's mentioned the Siddhas. Now the Siddhas are also a real interesting group, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, it's mentioned, text 45 in chapter 8, on the earth there are many yogis who exhibit some feeble mystic power by manufacturing pieces of gold like magic. But the inhabitants of the planet Siddha Loka are actually extremely powerful in mysticism. They can fly from one planet to another without airplanes. This is called Lagima Siddhi. They can actually become light and fly in the sky. So it's not it sounds fantastical, like there are beings that don't need wings and they can fly in the sky. They can become light and fly. And like, how many movies has there existed where you see this concept? Okay, you get witches and brooms, and that's okay, you hear about that a little bit in the Shastra. But human beings always have this thing, like, if we didn't have the tendency to fly, aeroplanes wouldn't be developed. Because there's something about it that, and it seems like, wow, they can fly. But there's a whole planet where human beings can fly, or the inhabitants can fly. And they have this ability because they've developed certain siddhas. Now, again, you can see that the thing that stands out with each of these characters, or in civilizations, or I don't know what you would call them, but is that they possess some part of Krishna's magic. In magic, it's a term used loosely, but Krishna's Shakti. And Krishna is Yogeshvara. He's the master of all mysticism. And for someone to to practice or master the yogic siddhis, they have to really go through a lot of penance and austerity and connection and detachment from the material world in order to develop them. And so they're showcasing to some degree this aspect of Krishna. And then the other people mentioned here is the Pitriloka, or the people who go through Pitriloka. And this is a really interesting one because there's lots of misunderstandings about what Pitriloka is. And it said in the teachings of Queen Kunti that if one prepares oneself, one may go to the higher planetary systems, or similarly one may go to Pitriloka. Therefore one may meet one's forefathers, there one may meet one's forefathers if they have been eligible to go there. So we're just coming out of that whole September, October season where it's very common in different Hindu culture to offer oblations on behalf of the forefathers. The thing is, though, that the understanding of how to do it is sometimes very mixed. Actually, that's putting it very lightly. And this I'm saying that not everybody, maybe not everyone's mixed up, but definitely a lot of people are. And saying it from as growing up myself, like, in all these different types of worship and having done it with my parents and things. Firstly, it's watered down to a very sentimental level, that whatever the person enjoyed in this lifetime, then you offer that to them. And so that means that whether it would uplift them or degrade them, it doesn't matter. We'd offer that. So if the person, liked a particular brand of whiskey, then that would go on the plate. But the idea behind it was a lot more cultured, a lot more thoughtful, a lot more considering the Supreme Lord, that the only things that would be offered to the Pitris or the forefathers was what was already Krishna Prasad, what was already given as a sacrifice to Krishna, so that by offering that Prasad, they would be able to progress spiritually, even though they were not in that body. Because your relatives were doing it, you would get the benefit of that Prasad. Now, if you were offering, a bottle of whiskey, then what benefit would they be getting? They would be getting the same karmic reaction, for that sort of activity. However, the offerings of Shraddha, etc., or the Pinda, when someone leaves their body, these are important things, and because it is the obligation of the child, particularly the son, that they would offer these oblations, so that in case the parent was in a situation where they were trapped karmically, then they would get relief from that karmic entrapment. However, it's done in a certain way, with a certain intention. And still, the sentimental idea that if I do this, then I'm united with my forefathers, it's not necessarily true. Because we can read here from the purport that those who are residents of Pitriloka are those who are pious enough to perform these sacrifices. And if you attain Pitriloka, like the verse in Bhagavad Gita says, those who worship the demigods go to the demigods, those who worship the forefathers go to the forefathers, those who worship me come to me being Krishna. And but if we worship the forefathers, we can attain Pitriloka. But if our forefathers are not there, we don't see them. They would have to be there for us to see them, and we know that the soul's moving on through their journey. And the Pitriloka is a very high planetary system. And if people are engaged in negative, low-minded behavior, then they don't reach those high planetary systems. So it needs to be seen in context. And then the verse mentions Chanaraloka. So Chanaraloka, we learn about the Chanaraloka in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it says, in outer space, all the demigods, including the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, Siddhaloka, and Chanaraloka, offer their prayers and dance to the accompaniment of songs, drums, and the beating of drums. Similarly, in Navadvip city, all the professional dancers, musicians, and blessers gather together dancing in great jubilation. This is for the birth of Lord Chaitanya. But then again it comes up in the 7th canto, where the Chinara planet said, these when the different planetary systems were praying to Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nishnadev, "Oh Lord, because you have destroyed the demon Hiranyakashipu, who was always at stake in the hearts of all honest men, always a stake in the hearts of all honest men, we are now relieved and eternally take shelter of your lotus feet, which the conditioned soul, which award the conditioned soul liberation from materialistic contamination." So from these two verses, we gather that the residents of Chinara Loka, their empowered abilities to pray. They pray very deep prayers. So while the Gandharvas are singing and the Siddhas have their mystics, the Chinara Lokas, they have this ability to offer prayers. And then we go to Panagaloka. Where is that? Before we go to, there we go. Worshipping the powerful sun god Surya, the Gandharvas sing in front of him, the Apsaras dance before the chariot, the Nisacharas follow the chariot, and the Panagas decorate the chariot. So we see that the ability of the residents of Panagaloka is that they have this natural ability to design and decorate. And so everybody has their space, but you'll see that everybody has a very artistic space. All of these planets, they're extremely artistic. And they're able to offer all of those talents to Krishna in very specific ways. Now the Kinnaras from Kinnara Loka, this one's also really interesting, because we know that Garuda, he is part of Kinnara Loka. And the Kinnara Lokas, we hear about them in the fourth canto, this actual canto. And it says, from the description of the verse, Garuda appears to belong to the Kinnara planet. The inhabitants of the Kinnara planet have the same features as Garuda. Their bodily features are those of a human being, but they have wings. The word Gita Kriti indicates that the inhabitants of Kinnara Loka are very expert in singing the glories of the Lord. In each and every universe, there are different types of planets, and each planet has its distinctive features. On the strength of this verse, we can understand that in Kinnara Loka, inhabitants can fly with their wings. There's also a planet known as Siddha Loka, where the inhabitants can fly even without wings. Thus, each and every planet has some distinctive facility. That is the beauty of the varied creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we see Krishna through these different planetary systems, because this is Krishna's creation, and this is how Krishna is expressing himself through his creation. When you look at a picture, by looking at the picture, you're able to say something about the artist. So Srila Prabhupada, sometimes it's quoted how Hayagriva, when Srila Prabhupada and his early followers were staying in an ashram, Hayagriva woke one morning and saw, look at that beautiful sunrise. And Srila Prabhupada said, and Hayagriva said, it looks like a painting. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, when you look at the painting, you need to question, who is the artist? And so therefore, when we look at all these planetary systems, we get a hint about Krishna's appreciation for fine arts and also Krishna's expression of himself through all different living beings. So you can, of course they mentioned the Apsara Loka, and we know that the Apsaras are heavenly, beautiful, dancing people. They're just heavenly, beautiful, dancing beings. And we hear about them here. The musicians in the upper planetary systems are called Gandharvas. The dancing girls are called Apsaras. And after being attacked by the demons and evolving a beautiful form of a woman in the twilight, Brahma next created the Gandharvas and the Apsaras. Music and dancing employed in sense gratification are to be accepted as demoniac. But the same music and dancing when employed in glorifying the Supreme Lord as kirtan are transcendental, and they bring about a life completely fit for spiritual enjoyment. So you can see this picture of who is at the yagya, who is at the sacrifice of Prithu Maharaj. You have these apsaras, heavenly, beautiful dancing beings. You have these Gandharvas who are singing like angels. You have these Kinnaras who are humans with bird wings, and you have the Siddhas who can fly around the sky, and you have the Charanas who can offer prayers, and the Panagalokas who can be Panagas who are decorating everywhere. So you can imagine what this scenario must have looked like. And Prithu Maharaj, essentially, the essential point is that Prithu Maharaj was reciprocating with every one of them. There wasn't this sort of, because you are different, so therefore I fear you. Because that's what you find in the material world. What you find in the material world is where there is difference, there is fear, and then there is subjugation. If the color of my skin is different from the color of your skin, then I think you're different, and then I'm afraid of you, and then I subjugate you. And where I think my language is different from your language, my thought pattern is different from your thought pattern. But here we see the King Prithu, he is able to honor everyone in their differences, as well as the Supreme Lord. And because he's able to do that, from, and how does he do that? He does that with his words, by offering sweet words. He does it by his actions. He's offering the Anjali, or the prostrated hands. And he does that by his possessions, by his wealth. He is able to honor all the residents in that way, individually in 3 ways. But also when you honor people, you have to honor them for who they are. You have to honor them as an individual. Individuals are different. It's like you can do like copy and paste standard thank you message, and everybody kind of reads that. But that when it's personal and it's directed to you, then it makes a lot more impact. And so therefore, King Prithu Maharaj is reciprocating with these individuals, but he's reciprocating with these individuals through his relationship with the Supreme. And so this shows Prithu Maharaj, of course we know his caliber, but this shows exactly how he is not a immature devotee who just sees Krishna and doesn't see the people around him. But also, he is also not just some altruistic type of person who just wants to help everybody but doesn't see the presence of God. He's able to combine both, so therefore he's able to worship Krishna and he's able to honor everybody else that is around him. We have a few minutes, but I just wanted to end off by speaking a little bit about Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, whose disappearance day it is today. And just want to get it. I found something really interesting about him that I wanted to share with you. Firstly, his pranam mantra. Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padambujaya Te Namaha. And the translation of the pranam mantra is, I offer my respectful obeisances unto Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, the spiritual master of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who is renunciation personified, Vairagya, Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye, and he's always merged in a feeling of separation, Vipralambara Sambodhe, an intense love for Krishna. So Srila Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, he is the spiritual master of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. Usually on this day, or the day of the appearance of the disappearance day of the Acharya, we are able to directly approach them for blessings. And that's a very powerful thing. It's not something to take lightly. It's very powerful. And if we do approach them, then we can get direct reciprocation. One thing about Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, which I was reading, which I didn't know about before, was that it was in 1849 when he left Grihastha life after the death of his wife. This is not something much that we hear about, actually. I mean, we always see him in white, so it was obvious that he was a Babaji, but we never hear anything about his Grihastha life. But from this text, from this article on Gaudiya Vaishnava history, it shows that after his wife passed away, he moved to Vrindavan and took initiation from Sri Bhagavat Das Babaji, a disciple of Sri Jagannath Das Babaji. And we know that Sri Jagannath Das Babaji, he's also on the altar. If we look next to Sri Prabhupada, we find Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And that he stayed in Vrindavan actually for a very long time. We normally hear about him connected to Mayapur, but he actually stayed in Vrindavan performing bhajan under the trees in Govardhan, Nandagram, Varshana, Radhakund, Suryakund, Raval and Gokul for at least 30 years. And sitting in seclusion, he was chanting 128 rounds of japa every day. For those of you who may chant regularly Hare Krishna, I don't know if I physically can do it, chant 128 rounds a day. I don't think I can. Physically, not me. Some people can, but not me. And his mood in Vrindavan was very much one of lamentation, and approaching Srimati Radharani, therefore, Vipralambara Sambodhe. But then he's very much known for his mood of renunciation. As a Babaji, sometimes all he would do was he would eat some mud from the banks of Radhakund, and that was his meal. And other times he would take madhu curry. Madhu curry means that somebody may give you something to eat. It's begging. But this is very, it should be known how things are, how degraded in the age of Kali. Because now, madhu curry, or the idea that someone would give you food, was given for the Brahmanas, that their lives were completely dedicated to the worship of the scripture, and that they would therefore be completely detached from material civilization. Hence they weren't working, they weren't cooking, they weren't fashionably dressing, So therefore people would come and give them something. This is madhu curry. However, it's become now the thing, it's actually become an enterprise, and sometimes a frustrating enterprise, where you see at every robot, there's somebody there, who wants something. Now this is not to put down the idea that there's poverty and that people are starving in the world, and there's really a material solution that needs to bring forward. But it can become very obvious as a social commentary. It can become very obvious that this is now a business. It has really become a business, because the amount of energy and time that it takes to be at that spot, compared to just having to invest that energy in something that earns. And you can see in different countries around the world that even kids, it happens in India all the time, where it's a whole syndicate, and kids are made to beg so that other people get rich. They're working for other people. So you can just see how this idea of madhu curry, which started as something really pure and pristine, has over the years of Kali Yuga become very degraded. And this is not to say that we should not be kind-hearted. We should always give prasad when we can give prasad. So Sri Gaurakishore Das Babaji, that was his daily practice. He would also, when he residing in Vrindavan, he would pay his respects to every person, cow, animal, bird, tree and creeper and insect or ant in the holy dham. Now that meant you spent a lot of time on the ground, because if you know Vrindavan, there's a lot of them. And this was also something very sweet. While staying in Varshana, he made a flower garland for Radha Krishna every day. And you would think, you don't really, it's not very common that you see that male devotees make garlands. It does happen, but it's not very common, right? But here is Sri Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj, the renunciant of renunciants, and there he is making a flower garland for Krishna every day. So after 30 years in Vrindavan, he decided to go to Navadvip Dham. And this is also very interesting, because without diving deep into the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, we cannot get the mercy of Radha and Krishna. So in Navadvip, while he was in Navadvip Dham, he completely embodied the renunciation of Sri Rupa and Raghunath Das Goswamis, and completely detached. He would wear a discarded cloth that he would wash at the river, and he would drink from a rejected clay pot, and he would just mix some parched rice with some Ganges water or some mud from the bank of the Ganga to sustain his life. There's 2 books that he always carried on with him, and there was Pranatana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika, the 2 songbooks of Narottam Das Thakur. And on Ekadashis, he would not eat or drink a drop. So what is really interesting here is that he regularly associated and heard Srimad Bhagavatam with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Svananda Sukhanda Kunj in Godrumdweep. Now, if you've visited Mayapur or you've seen the home of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Mayapur, you would also know that across Bhaktivinoda Thakur's place, slightly down the road, is this temple, Svananda Sukhanda Kunj, also known as Surabhi Kunj, and that's where Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Gaurkishore Das Babaji, and most likely Bhakti Siddhanta, were all discussing the Bhagavatam. So you can just imagine how powerfully charged that place was. And actually, then I was thinking back to it, that when we were in Mayapur in February with Bhakti Marg Swami, we stopped at that place and we sang a little bhajan. It's these old ladies in that place, and they made us sing. I can't remember what we sang. I think it was probably Nadia Gudrum Nityananda Mahajan. So it is the place of Lord Nityananda. So the concentrated energy that must be in that place. On the request of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was not going to take disciples because he had this mood of renunciation. But on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's request, he reconsidered and accepted Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati as his disciple. And so therefore, we hear about Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and we can hear about his renunciation. But it's very obvious that his renunciation, because he would live in a latran, and when they tried to build him a bhajan kutir, we don't have time to read everything, tried to build him a proper bhajan kutir, he said, he locked the door and said that he didn't want it and let them come in, and so therefore he is a person who represents extreme renunciation. But what's very clear, that his renunciation is coming from deep taste, deep attachment to Krishna. So today we can pray to Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj for loving detachment, detachment that's coming from a place of love, that's coming from the seed of Krishna Prema. We can also pray to him for residence in the holy dhams, either physically or even while we're here away from the holy dhams, to always keep the dham within our minds. We can pray to him to help us on our spiritual journey with whatever specific things that we're dealing with, because prayer must be personal. And if we don't know how to pray, then maybe the residents of Charanaloka could help us also, if we can say a prayer to them. So I'm going to stop here. If there's any thoughts or comments or questions. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande.